AP and a W. Wind and AP. Air pressure. There you go. All right. So we talked about wind and air pressure, right? And we talked about air pressure and how as the air pressure comes down, we watched that little video yesterday. And what happened in that video I showed y'all? Come on! You weren't here, you didn't see it. What was it? What happened? The newspaper, the ruler.
Oh,
Yeah, so what happened though when the newspaper wasn't there and the ruler was just on the table, what happened? When he hit it? No, without the newspaper.
Oh.
It just came off the table, right? But then when you put the newspaper over the top of the ruler, what happened? It broke, right? Because of the air pressure, right? All right, so today we are going to talk about air masses and fronts, and this is strictly vocab. So these are things that when you look at it, it's understanding it, but you need to know what the vocab is, okay? So yesterday we talked about wind. So just to bring it back a little bit, wind is the movement of air from places of high pressure to places of low pressure. So wind moves in large masses called air masses. So air masses also move from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. These air masses retain the characteristics where they actually form. So we're going to talk about a couple different types. Okay? So you see some warm air masses, some cold air masses. And when different masses mix, that's when different things start to happen in the atmosphere. And we're going to talk about severe weather next week. So, air masses can be described in two ways: moisture and temperature. So now this is where vocab comes in. So there's continental, which is dry air. So continental, dry. And then maritime, moist. So think MM. Maritime, moist, continental is dry. So depending on if the air mass forms over land or water, depends on if it carries a lot of moisture. So we've already talked about over land and over water. So if it's over water, it's going to be more moist, right, than it would be if it's over land. Temperature, it can either be tropical, which is warm air, polar, which is cold air, or Arctic, which is the coldest air, okay? So the temperature of the air mass depends on if it formed closer to the equator or closer to the poles. So we said if something's near the equator, it's going to be what? It's going to be warmer, and if it's the poles, it's going to be colder, okay? So let's put it all together. So you can have continental, tropical, continental polar, continental Arctic. You can have maritime tropical or maritime polar. So you're going to see these and be very familiar with these, okay, because this is just the condensed version of what we're talking about. Okay, so CT, continental tropic, CP, continental polar, CA, continental Arctic, maritime polar MT, and maritime tropical, MT, and maritime polar MP. Okay, so knowing moisture and temperature, what would be the characteristics of these? So continental polar would be what? Continental means it's what? It's dry. And polar means it's cold. So dry, cold. What about maritime tropical? Moist and warm. Okay, continental Arctic. Dry and very cold. Okay, make sure you know the difference because polar is cold, but Arctic is very cold. Okay? So let's look up here. You've got, this is what? Arctic. Maritime polar, so that means it's what? Moist and cold, that's right. What about down here? Moist and warm because it's what? What's MT? Maritime, tropical, which is where I want to be right now, someplace tropical. All right, CP. Continental what? Polar. So that means it's what and what? Continental what? You got it, girl. Come on. Cold and dry. There you go. MP. We saw this already. What is it? You got to get familiar with these. Maritime polar. So that means it's okay. Then we've got CT. Continental tropical, which means what? Dry and hot, dry and warm. And then MT, we've already seen over here, is maritime tropical, where Mrs. Ibarra wants to be someplace tropical. And that means it's what and what? Moist and warm, right? Okay, so everybody got that? All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about are fronts. Okay, so a front is the boundary between two different air masses. Okay, so along a front, warmer, less dense air is always forced upward. So yesterday we did talk about air. Okay, so you've got warm air that always does what? Rises, and cold air, it drops, it sinks. So warm air rises, cold air sinks. So there's 4 types of fronts we are going to talk about: warm, cold, stationary, and occluded. Okay? So the first one is a warm front. A warm front occurs. No, thank you. Thank you, though. No coffee. That's the first time I said no. All right. So a warm front occurs when warm air slowly moves into an area covered by cooler air. So it takes a long time for warm air to displace colder air. Okay? So this is marked by a long and steady rain. And when you see it, its red semicircles are symbols. Okay, so these down here, I'm sorry, it kind of goes off. So those are the symbols. So if you see red semicircles, red half circles, that means warm front. So think red, you think what when you see red? Heat, hot, right? Okay, so red semicircles are warm front. Everybody with me? Okay. So, sorry, all these things on the board, not my classroom. So this is what would happen. So what do you see? What do you see with those arrows up there? The red one is representing what? Hot, warm, and the blue one would represent cold, okay? So that is a warm front. So if you see this, this means a what? A warm front. So everybody familiar with maybe seeing these kind of things on the Weather Channel? Yeah?
You did this in 7th grade.
You did? All right. Next is a cold front. A cold front forms when cold, dense air quickly moves into an area that is already occupied by warm air. So compared to the speed of a warm front, cold fronts move very fast, okay? So they're marked by heavy precipitation and thunderstorms for a short period of time. These are represented by blue triangles, okay? So you see red semicircles, we're what? Warm. And if we see blue triangles, we are cold. So when you see blue, think cold, red, we're warm, okay? So this is what happens in a cold front, okay? So the cold easily takes over the warm. So blue triangles, that is our cold front, okay? All right, next is a stationary front. So fronts are not moving towards each other, but they are moving parallel, okay? So parallel, then a stationary front will occur, okay? So mild precipitation can occur on a stationary front, and this is represented by red semicircles on one side, and blue triangles on the other, okay? Red one side, blue the other, opposite sides, okay? Because the next one's gonna look a little different. So red one direction, blue the other. And the last one is an occluded front, okay? So cold fronts move faster than warm fronts. So when an active cold front overtakes a warm front, then an occluded front will form. So this will force the warm front up into the air, which will lead to very heavy rain. So this is usually marked by purple semicircles and triangles in the same direction. So stationary, blue one way, red the other. And in an occluded, you have purple semicircles and triangles in the same direction. Okay? So it looks like this. So what's this one?
No.
That's a cold front. What if these were red half circles? Nope, just red half circles.
Oh.
That'd be a warm front. And then this one is a stationary because you got both and they go opposite directions. And last, occluded. Okay? Does everybody see what I'm saying? It's just a lot of vocab. Understand? Okay, so we need to know the difference between air masses and fronts. 4 fronts, and then you need to know your different air masses. So you got moist and dry, and so, yeah, temperature. Okay, so you got moist and dry, and then you got either super cold, cold, and warm. That's it. Does anybody have questions? Super short and sweet. No questions? Are we sure? All right, so today you have 2 CK12 activities, one on fronts and one on air masses, and then you have some ed puzzles.